morning, good afternoon, everybody, from wherever you are joining. So, my name is Tony Chiyo, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our WiBA session of today. So, WiBA, which is the platform that allowed us to discuss about the challenges and opportunities faced by the renewable energy sector in Africa. And it's a pleasure to have you there. So we have had, and we have very good attendance. We have more than 100 people signing up for this webinar that are promising to be quite interesting. And we had people from 32 countries, 4 continents. And in terms of the profession represented, so we have banking and finance, we have energy, we have education, government, retail, and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting topic. What are the impact of investing in renewable energy power? Looking at reflection and case study from East Africa. And you can see the picture of some of our speakers. So before we proceed, let me tell you more about our house rules, announce them. So unless you are a speaker, I will recommend that you keep your camera off, please. So that will be helpful for the conversation. And also, I want your microphone turned off. We're only going to have the speaker basically expressing themselves, talking. You're going to have the chance to ask your question at any point in the conversation. Just drop them in the chat feature. And my colleague is on the line, Ochieng, who is our regional director for Kenya and East Africa, as well as my other colleague, Jeremiah Soronka, who's on the call as well. So you can ask your questions, send them into the chat. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. In fact, we're going to have an intermediary Q&A after the first 3 presentations. We're going to have another presentation after that Q&A, and we'll finish up again with another Q&A. If you have any feedback whatsoever, feel free to send that to us at source@renewablesinaafrica.com. Last but not the least, I want you to have a fantastic time. Enjoy yourself. And as I say, we're going to have a very good time together. Let me announce now the agenda. So we're going to be talking about very briefly introducing what renewable in Africa is. And most of you will know it already anyway, but it's still good to refresh people's mind. We're going to introduce the topic. And after that, we move into the presentation. We have 4 speakers today. One of them obviously has not been able to join, so will be replaced by another distinguished gentleman who's with us. It's part of FinFund. After that, the Q&A, as I mentioned, the part 1, we're going to have 2 or 3 questions depending on how we are doing with the time. Then Alex from CDC will close off with the presentation. Then the Q&A. Very, very important. I want you to stick with us till the end because we have a very specific special announcement that we want to make today. So you should feel privileged because that's the first time we actually go in public with this initiative. So please, please make sure that you stay with us, and you finish, you're going to end. Because we're going to have a number of speakers today, so the conversation is going to be an hour and a half, right, maximum. So as opposed to 1 hour as we do normally. So let me now move more into the topic and talk about renewables in Africa in a couple of words. What drives us? Very simply, picture that I saw back in 2008 was not satisfactory for me. That was a continent that was not very much electrified, shocked me, made me angry, revolted. But then we decided to turn this anger into action. And we say we want to make sure that by 2040, we want to see an Africa that is bright and also jubilant. And that's what we're going for, right? So the mission is very simple. We are about bringing back power to Africa, and this is our job. And we're not going to stop until we make sure that we can see that through. So what is renewables in Africa? Very simply, we are a clean energy engineering company. So we are serving developers, investors, but also project owners. So what do we do for them? We provide project origination services to this client to help them to identify and also develop the right project. That's what we do as well. And provide the market insight and the business intelligence that is necessary for you to grow the market and to make sure that you can land project that you want. As you know, most of you will know, we're also a media platform. That's what makes us different. We are a 2-in-1 company, right? So we promoting and working for awareness building on the renewable energy sector for businesses, but also the general public. That's what we are. We've had a number of publications since we've been around, which is 4 years these days. And that's just a couple of them. I'm not going to go too much into detail into that. That was just to show you what we've done in the past. We have a special announcement, as I say. You want to make sure that you stick with us. Stay with us to the end, yeah? Very important. Now, let me move into today's conversation. It's all about talking about the socio-economic impact of renewable energy power, because I've always said it's all about livelihood. It's very good to have a large, big project, but what is it making as a difference to the people, right? And most importantly, people on the ground, not just investors, because it's good to be investing and recoup the money. Great, nothing wrong with that. But what about the people on the ground? They're getting the power and wires. And that's the kind of story we're going to hear today. We have 4 distinguished speakers. We have Rose Ochieng, consultant from NIRAS, and together with Silas Otieno. We have Alex as well, and Peter, I don't think is with us today because he has a last minute commitment. So he's going to be replaced by Yuho, who is from FinFund. So that's what you're going to have. So definitely, guys, you're not losing on the change here, right? So, all fantastic. So let me just check. Rose, Silas, are you around?
Yes, we are.
Excellent, brilliant. That's what I wanted to hear. So we're going to have your presentation, right? And if I remember correctly, you want me to share that, yeah, to run it for you. Let me open it, right? Just give me a second and I have it. Yeah, it should be coming. Can you still see my screen, everybody?
Not yet.
Okay, can we see the screen?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yes.
Excellent.
Hi,
Excellent.
hi, this is Peter. That is clear, yes.
Excellent. So let me just remind again, please, to make sure that the conversation runs smoothly. I only want the speakers, on camera and on mic, right? And if you're not speaking right now for the speakers, please go on mute. I just would like to have Rose and Silas talking, right? So Rose, over to you, please. And let me know when you want me to move.
All right, good. Thank you very much, Tony, for the introduction. And my colleague and Rose will be running the presentation. And basically, Rose will take us through the introduction, what was the aim of this, study, and thereafter I will take through the findings. Rose, over to you, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll begin by giving you a contextual understanding of what we actually did and what the study was. Tony, you can move to the first slide. Okay. So NIRAS was contracted by FinFund to undertake a socioeconomic impact study of the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project. FinFund is short for Finnish Fund for Industrial Cooperation Limited, which is part of the consortium of equity partners that finance the project. Sorry, Peter. The slides are moving. I don't know whether it's just my side.
Oh, you have the slide moving.
Yeah, well, it skipped from the first slide. So I'm in the first slide.
So is it still okay, or is it still moving?
No, now they're fine, but you need to move back one slide.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's fine.
So the study was conducted over a period of 5 months between December 2019 and March 2020. And during the study, we had a field visit to the site in Marsabit. This was between the 29th of January and the 6th of February. Next slide, please. So I'll introduce NIRAS. NIRAS, which is where Silas and myself work, is an international multidisciplinary consultancy company that is headquartered in Scandinavia, and we work across 27 countries in Europe, Africa, Asia, Middle East, and the Americas. Now, NIRAS Africa, which is where Silas and myself are based, is part of the NIC, which is the NIRAS International Consulting Business Unit. So we have several business units within NIRAS Group, and NIRAS Africa falls within the NIC group, NIC business unit, and the NIC business unit does development consulting. And we've done this for over 40 years. The main services that we offer is project management and technical assistance. We have over 400 staff globally. Please move to the next slide, Tony. If you look at the map on my right, you'll see the red dots. That is where all the NIC offices are globally. And the type of services that we provide are across different sectors, including agri, business, water, climate change, monitoring and evaluation and learning, which is of course why we got this job in the first place. And NIRAS Africa is based in Nairobi in Kenya. We provide services across 19 of the NIC core sectors, including MEL. And we have 6 other offices across Africa, and one of them is in Tanzania. There's another one in Malawi, Mozambique. We have offices in Ethiopia. We have a project office in Benin as well. So our clients are varied. We have multilateral aid agencies and bilateral development partners as well. So these include the United Nations, the European Commission, World Bank, African Development Bank, DFID, amongst others. Next slide, please. Now I'll give you an overview of the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project itself. The Lake Turkana Wind Power Project is located in Laisamis constituency. That's in Marsabit County, which is in northeastern Kenya. Marsabit County is a very large county. It's a very vast region. It's an arid and semi-arid area. Just to put this in perspective, when Silas and myself visited for the field visit, we actually visited 7 sites across the county, but that we actually traveled over 500 kilometers just to do that. So it's that big. And the main livelihoods are pastoralism, agriculture, and fishing. The area is largely marginalized, so there's limited access to electricity, water, education, and infrastructure, including roads. Laisamis constituency is Lake Turkana Wind Power's area of influence. What I mean by this is that it is the place where the wind farm is located. Now, the wind farm covers an area of 40,000 acres. It has 365 turbines within those 40,000 acres. And so this is, the wind farm is located within Laisamis constituency. There's also the C77 road. It's the main road that connects, the area to, to Kargi constituency, and it passes 208 kilometers, and it passes right across Laisamis constituency. The other reason why this is the area of influence is that most of the impacts from the project will actually be felt within this site. Now, the area has 4 main ethnic groups, and that's the El Molo, the Rendile, the Samburu, and the Turkana. And for a long time, there's been a lot of inter-ethnic conflicts between these 4 communities. And what happened with the project is that they ensured that the area of influence comprised of members from all of those communities in order to try and avert some of these conflicts. Next slide, please. So Lake Turkana Wind Power Project comprises of 2 main components. The first one is the wind farm, which I've explained, and it was constructed at a cost of 70 billion Kenyan shillings, which is equivalent to 625 million euros. And of course, the rehabilitation of the 208 kilometers road that I've just talked about from Kargi Junction to Loyangalani. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the spillover effects of the road itself are amazing. The road was constructed basically just to transport the turbines, but as a result, it has, it has brought in a lot of trade to the area, and that was one of the unexpected impacts that has resulted from the project itself. Now, another component of Lake Turkana Wind Power Project is the Winds of Change. The Winds of Change is the corporate social responsibility arm of the project. It was established as a foundation in 2015 and later re-registered as an NGO. What they mainly do is they implement social projects, which includes, employability, improved education, livelihoods. They have water projects. And then to date, what they're reporting is that they have implemented about 2.5 million euros worth of projects across Lysamis constituency. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk a little bit about the study that we actually conducted. We had three main objectives. The first one was to assess how the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project has impacted the lives and well-beings of the employees, then to determine whether the project has contributed to poverty reduction in the area, and finally to provide evidence to attribute the changes in the lives and well-beings of the communities in the project area to the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project and of course the Winds of Change initiatives. For our methodology, we used a mixed methods approach where we combined contribution analysis, most significant change, and before and after comparison. Now with the most significant change, what we did is we collected case studies as we interviewed our respondents, both as employees, but also people living within Marsabit County, and we'll highlight some of those as we continue to present. And then the before and after comparison, what we did is we picked a 7-year period. The reason for that was that the project has been implemented since 2014. So the idea was to understand what the impacts were, or what the impacts have been since the beginning of the project, which was the construction, up to now, which is implementation. Now you'll understand that there's some employees that were actually employed when the construction was going on, then they stopped, but there are others who came in after the construction, so during the implementation, but there are also others who've been working all through. So the idea was to capture, all those nuances within the study. In order to collect our data, we used three main methods. The first one was face-to-face interviews, or one-on-one interviews, if you like, with employees at the site. We were only able to interview 47 employees. There are currently a total of 339 employees working at Lake Turkana Wind Power Project. Now the project has an office in Nairobi, and the rest of the employees work within the county Marsabit. At Nairobi, they have 24 employees, and they have 315 employees on site. So out of the 315, we interviewed 47. Of the 315 employees, one of the interesting things was that 93% are actually from the county itself. Then there are 6% that are from other regions within Kenya, and there's only 1% that is comprising of expatriates. Now, other than the one-on-one interviews, we also conducted focus group discussions. These we did with the members of the community liaison team. The community liaison team is very interesting because it comprises of men and women, but they are employed by the company, but they live amongst the community. So what they do is they work as the liaison between the community and the company, and one of the main things that they do is that when the company, through the Winds of Change, wants to implement a project, they are the ones who mobilize, they bring the communities together. There's a whole needs assessment that is conducted and a prioritization that is done, and then a project is decided upon. So the company doesn't just decide on the type of project that they want to implement, but they really engage the community in this process. And that is where the community liaison team plays a key role. Another key role that they undertake is that they're supposed to try to gauge whether there's conflicts that are going to arise within the community at any given time. So usually there's tensions, or there's talk about a conflict, and what they would do in such a case is that they would tell the company, then the company facilitates a process where they bring together community elders and they sit and they discuss, and in so doing, they've been able to actually avert some conflicts that were going to arise within the community. So these are the two main roles that the community liaison people play, and that is why we thought we should interview them. Now we had two discussions with them. One was done for the women-only employees, and another one was done for the male-only employees. And Silas and I took either. Then finally, we also conducted key informant interviews. This is where we interviewed people that work at the Winds of Change initiatives across the sites that we visited. So we interviewed, of course, the staff, but we also interviewed community elders from the area when we visited each of the sites. So in this way, we were actually able to gather a lot of information and knowledge from them. Next slide, please. Silas will take on from here.
All right, thank you very much, Rose, for the elaborate introduction. And basically at this juncture, I want to take you through the impacts of Lake Turkana Wind Project. So we're going to look at impacts at employee level and impacts at the wider community level. Next slide, please. So we look at the livelihoods. What we ask the employees, what would you consider was what would you say was the main source of livelihood before you joined the project? And at the moment, what would you say is the main source of livelihood? And if we look at the graph on the far left, so it's very clear and very apparent that employment at Lake Turkana Wind Project is the main source of livelihood for this employee. That's 98%. And very interesting is the reduction in relief. Like before the project began, we see over 70% of these employees relied on relief. Like this area, as Rose did mention, is widely marginalized. Access to employment opportunity is very limited. So a number of them relied on relief, and now that has gone down to 6%. And also very interestingly, we can see some bit of business activities coming up, which I will talk more a bit in the coming slides, and also some bit of trade around livestock, sales. And if you look at the monthly income, that's the next graph, it is very clear that the employee income levels are really increased. We asked about the average household incomes. That's on a monthly basis before the project, and that was coming to about 30,000 Kenya shillings. And this so far has increased to 87,000 Kenya shillings. So from the employment gains, the dividends they receive from the employment have basically shot up their household incomes by over 126%. Next slide. And we had this, this question to the employees, looking at your life before you got employed in the project and now, what would you say? Would you say your life, your well-being has improved, remained the same, or increased? And we see a very big proportion, that is 87% of the employees, reporting that their well-being have improved. And we ask them to qualify. Why would you say that your well-being has improved? We see a significant number of employees, that's over 80%, being able to take their children to school. And very interesting bit is that over half, that is over 50%, are able to take their children to boarding schools in the neighboring counties. And also in terms of improving this household well-being, we see a number of households, that's a number of employees being able to build modern houses. That's more than half. That is, if you look at the area, the traditional house, the manyatas, where they use the rags to build the houses. But now we see a situation whereby the employees are building modern houses with concrete floor, better iron sheets, which has really improved their well-being. And also in terms of investments in the household assets, over 7 out of 10 employees have been able to buy household assets. And very interesting, like this area is really where people value livestock, and close to half, more than 2 out of 3 are able to now improve their herd sizes. So in terms of the well-being, we see significant shifts in the well-being of these employees. Next slide, please. Apart from the improvements we see in terms like now in building modern houses, taking the children to school, we also see the employees investing in better energy sources. Let's say, for instance, if you look at the source of energy, for example, source of lighting before the project, many of these households depended on, on kerosene, for instance. Like now, the number that are investing in solar panels have tremendously increased from 43 to 70%. And just to put this into perspective, the Lake Turkana Wind Project is not mandated to distribute power to the households. This is the role of the government. But now, being that the area is where the energy is being produced, there's expectation from the communities that they need to be connected. But now, once they have made clear that it's a mandate of the government, we see a number now shifting to solar energy sources. And also in terms of cooking energy sources, for example, we see a number of them who are using, let's say, charcoal before and firewood. That is going down now. And those who are investing in gas cooker, that's the clean and efficient energy sources, is increased from 21 to 51%. So basically, the incomes that these employees have or gain from the project, they're able to make significant improvements within their households, as shown in the graph. Next slide, please. In terms of household food security, just to put it into perspective, this area is a coastal community, and the main meals that this would depend on are either meat or milk. And so we ask about what would you say is the main diets that you consume in a household. So we had a checklist of all different food items that probably anybody would consume in a household. So if you look at the graph, let's say like now the meat, you can see like now the consumption of meat has more or less remained the same. But the fruits, vegetables, bread, these have increased by more than half. And then we ask ourselves, what would you say are the main drivers towards this increased consumption of healthy foodstuffs? Now, one significant thing that we found out is that the improved road access network, that is the rehabilitation of the road that Rose did talk about. Ideally, this road was just meant to transport the turbines, but the spillover effect, the impact has been so massive. Now we have a lot of cross-border trade. We have so many vehicles coming from neighboring countries. We have so many goods and commodities coming from neighboring countries. And now with increased availability of food, increased disposable incomes have significantly contributed to increased household food consumption. And now over 94% of the households report that they feel they are more food secure as compared to the situation before. And very interestingly, over half of these households occasionally would go without food, because there was the availability was limited and there were no disposable incomes. So we can significantly see how Lake Turkana Wind Project and the incomes gained from the project are now making positive changes in the livelihoods and well-being of these employees. Next slide. So those are the impacts at the employee level. We also moved the community. There are a number of community projects that have been done by the Winds of Change. So we visited a number of boreholes that were visited by done by the company. We visited some health facilities, which I'm going to talk more about in the next few minutes. So let's move to the next slide, please. So if you look at access to water, as I did mention, this area is very dry, and access to water is a big problem. We have women, children walking over 30 kilometers to fetch water. That's before the project. Now, through the Winds of Change initiative, they've been able to dig a number of boreholes within the communities. And these boreholes have been fitted with the water purification systems, that's with the reverse osmosis. So whatever water is consumed from these points is clean, safe, and healthy for drinking. And so because of improved consumption of safe and clean drinking water, we see a significant drop in the case of waterborne diseases. For example, if you look at a case like amoeba, for example, before, they had over 20% reporting that. And now that has gone down to 17%. Typhoid from 30 to 21, and diarrhea from 13 to 9. And very interesting that apart from just the people who use these boreholes or the water points, so many households are now able to come in to collect water from these points. And from which peaked, over 4,000 households are benefiting from this, water points. This has had a number of effects apart from, contributing to better health outcomes. We are going to see more about this in details, especially when it comes to enhancing food security. Before, there was a lot of fight because of scarcity of water resources, but that has gone down, which we're going to see in the next slides. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the access to water, how people used to trek before long distances, and just, you can see the picture on the right. This is somebody just consuming water from this tap. This water is already treated, it's very safe. Whereas the same person, the same old man would walk for over 35 kilometers to get water. So we can see the changes that have come in because of these boreholes that were drilled by the company. And next slide. Access to healthcare. This is very interesting, and amongst all the employees employed within the wind farm are under medical cover. So every employee has a medical cover that can take care of up to 5 household members. And now with the improved availability of this, healthcare services, and we see over half, that 64% of the employees having the ability to access healthcare services from private medical service providers in the area and beyond. And also, very interesting, we visited a health facility that was supported by the Winds of Change. What the company did in this health facility called Burariania is very simple initiatives, very simple interventions. They went, installed the solar panels just to improve the, the energy and the lighting facility in the facility. They did the water tanks so that there's improved availability of water in the area. And very interesting, just down there, you can see a picture of some beds there. That's the maternity wing. Before there was no maternity wing, it was not well maintained. So the company did the rehabilitation of this maternity wing. They bought the beds, they brought in the facilities, and also just tried to organize the drug storage in this facility. So what we picked out in this facility is a very simple, very clear impacts. Like, for example, before these solar systems were installed, access to electricity is a problem here. So the facility would only serve the community for about 8 hours in a day. But now with the improved lighting system, they operate 24 hours. That is really a big impact. Secondly, the number of people who used to come to this facility were very few because there were no services. And now, for example, most of the women around the area used to give birth at home. And now most of them are now coming to the facilities. And in fact, from the records, before they would record about 2 to 3 births in a month, but now this has gone up to over 40 births in a month. These are very, very big impact. And also just the availability of drugs in this area has now improved. For example, now the government is now trying to promote and bring in more drugs in the facility. And before, being that there were no people coming, there was only one health officer. Now there are over 3 people employed here. So we can see that kind of change. And apart from that, there are very interesting, impacts, like now the improved vaccination programs. Before, the children were not able to get vaccinated, but they're able to get that. And there are a lot more case studies that we were able to pick. Rose, would you want to speak about the case studies in this area?
Sure. So one of the things that, as I said earlier, that we did is that we interview staff at the sites that we visited, as well as community elders. So at Buriaramia dispensary, we interviewed the clinical officer, who's basically in charge of the medical services within the facility. And one of the things that he told us is that some of the interventions, as Silas has mentioned, are very simple, but they make such a big difference for him and of course for the community that he serves. One of the things that, as you can see on the left, that Lake Turkana Wind Power Project did is that they put up shelves, and through these shelves, the clinical officer was able to organize his medication. Now, he said that this has helped him to reduce the amount of time that he has to respond to emergencies when and if needed. In the past, all his medication would be in boxes on the floor. So if someone comes and they have an emergency, it's very difficult for him to attend to them because he doesn't know where to get what. So it would take him some time, but this has been drastically reduced by the fact that now all his medication is on shelves. Another thing that he indicated was that in the past he didn't have an incinerator, but the project was able to build one for him. So now he's able to dispose of all his equipment and everything in a very, a clean manner. And so he doesn't have any fear of infections or reinfections at the facility. Another thing that he said is that the project gave him a refrigerator. Now with the refrigerator, he's able to stock vaccinations. And so a lot more children from the area are coming to the facility for vaccinations. And so he even had a chart in his office that showed the improvement or the increased number of vaccinations that he's able to facilitate for children around the area now that he has the vaccines with him. Now, when we talked to the community elder, he said that from his perspective, the biggest change was the comfort and the dignity that the facility now offered the women. Now, apparently in the past, because there were no beds and of course there was no electricity, when women came to deliver at the clinic, they would actually do it on the floors, on boxes on the floors. But now with the beds, they're able to actually deliver on beds. It's comfortable. There's a lot more dignity towards the process. And so a lot more women are actually coming to the facility to deliver. Furthermore, they also have a ward where the women can go and rest for a little bit before they are discharged to go home. So it has really changed, the whole environment within the facility, but also enable people to come or encourage more people to come to the facility for assistance.
Thank you, Rose. And Tony, maybe you can go to the next slide. Previously I talked about the security, and I want to bring this into perspective. The area before, we have these 4 dominant tribes, the Samburu, the Turkana, the Ndile, and the Molo. So in the past, there have been a lot of conflicts between these communities simply because there's a lot of cases around cultural wrestling and fights over water resources. And before the area, actually where the project site is located, where the wind farm has been built, everybody used to refer it as a war zone, where the communities, that's Samburu, the Turkana, would meet and fight because of livestock. But now, since the wind farm occupied the area, it more or less acts like a buffer. In fact, now people call it as a buffer zone. So that crisscrossing between communities has stopped. And secondly, before there were so many cases of cattle rustling, and these were also fueled by scarcity of water. So before, a number of communities, let's say in the north, would move down to the south to water their animals, but this would fuel conflict. But now, because of improved water availability, that's the boreholes drilled by the project, the communities in the north are able to water the animals, and now the conflicts around water scarcity has gone down. The cases around cattle rustling have gone down. And as Rose mentioned, the project employs communities, people from all these communities. And through that continued dialogue, continued conversations around security, we've seen a number of, conflicts being, stopped before they erupt. For example, the community liaison office are very key. Let's say now one community liaison office coming from Turkana, another one coming from the other tribe. So whenever there are any case of conflict that might arise, they begin the mediation process on time. And so because of this kind of interactions and improved access to water, and this area now acting as a buffer zone, we see cases of insecurity going down by over 80%. And now, for example, like the case of cattle rustling have gone down, the community conflicts due to water scarcity resources have all gone down. So in one way or the other, the project, in maybe this is an indirect impact that was never foreseen, but it has really contributed to a lot of security improvements in the area. Next slide, please. We'll look at access to financial services, and very interesting, if you can look at, let's say, for example, access to banking services. This has gone up. Like now all the employees have bank accounts, and SACCO, this is where the employees coming together to save their money, to borrow, and I will talk more about that in the coming slides. But also, if you look at the communication services, for example, you look at the use of mobile phone, this has gone up from 36 to 94%. That area, as I did mention, and I keep on talk about it, is very, very remote, very arid. And access to telecommunication services there is just a big problem. But one thing the company did was to liaise with a telecommunication company in Kenya to install a mast. And this has improved the network coverage. And we see so many people now using mobile phones for communication. Whereas in the past, the use of messengers where you come in, send somebody to leave a message, a number of people, close to half, used to do that, but now that has gone down to 4%. Whenever you want to communicate, just use a phone. I want to talk about the circle. This is the employee circle, where 94% of the employees belong to. So here, the employees come together, they collect some money on a monthly basis, and they can borrow. And we want to see how the circle, the formation of this circle or the cooperative, has improved their access to financial services. Move to the next slide, please. Yes, so within the circle, which I want to talk more about in details, the employees come together on a monthly basis, they collect money, they save, and you can borrow against your savings. And on a monthly basis, these employees collect up to 25,000 euros. That is equivalent to 3 million Kenyan shillings per month. And very interesting, out of this, they're able to borrow. Let's say now we've seen employees borrow to build houses. We've seen employees borrow money from the circle to go back to school to pay for education needs. And very interesting, and what struck me most when I was talking to one of the employees on how he has benefited from the circle. This employee whose mother was very sick. The mother was suffering from cancer. They didn't have any money to take her to the hospital. So this guy went to the circle. He borrowed $800. That's 80,000 Kenyan shillings. And he was able to take the mother to a better hospital in Nairobi. And he really feels convinced that he did what he could. And he says that without the circle, he wouldn't have gotten $800 to take the mother to the hospital. And we have so many of these case studies that really touched our hearts. And Rose, maybe just talk to this about this female employee you talked to.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing would be to mention or to emphasize here that the SACCO is an initiative by the employees themselves, but is fully supported by Lake Turkana Wind Power Project. So we found that very interesting, that the employees were able to put this together, but the wind power project has been able to support them as a result. Now, during the interviews, we interviewed one lady. She's a fairly young lady, and she joined the security department. She's employed as a security officer. And she said that she had benefited from the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project, both during construction and of course as an employee. Now, during construction, her father used to cook food and then sell to the casual laborers. And of course, in that sense, an income for the family. And in that way also, she was able to, to benefit from Lake Turkana Wind Power Project, even though indirectly. But then after she finished school, she then joined Lake Turkana as an employee. And she's been able to save with the SACCO over the whole time that she's been working. So she's been employed for about 3 years. And then as a result, she took out a loan and she constructed a stone house for her mother. It was very interesting for us because even when we were interviewing her, so I was doing the interviews, but she came with her phone, and on her phone there was a picture that showed the house of the mother, which was a traditional manyata, right next to the stone house that she's been able to build for her mother. Now, in her own words, the house cost her more than 300,000 Kenyan shillings, but she was able to do that after having been employed for just 3 years and not having even completed her university degree. So she kept saying, imagine how much I've done now. How much more will I be able to do in another 10, 15 years? And then interestingly, she really aspires to go back and do a university degree so that she can come back and get employed even at a higher position. And Lake Turkana Wind Power Project is very supportive of such initiatives. So they do support their employees. If you want to go back to school, if you want to further your education, they have programs, short-term courses, whatever you want to do to increase, your qualifications. They're very supportive of that. So, I mean, I think that really touched our hearts when we spoke to that young lady.
Thank you, Rose. Just in the essence of time, we just want to wrap this up and we can move to the next slide, Tony. Yeah, apart from support of the health facilities, we also visit the schools where the project has been able to support with the construction of modern classrooms, the laboratories, and also installation of the lighting system, the solar panels. And these have basically improved a number of the education outcomes. For example, we visited a school where the company supported the construction of laboratory. So through access to the laboratory in this school, the students are able to do their practicals there, and this has improved the performance in the science courses. So this one impact that we're able to pick in terms of the support provided to the education system. Next slide, please. Yeah, one big question that everybody would want to ask is, has the project contributed to poverty reduction? There's a big yes. So we looked at the employees, for example. We did the PPI scores, that's the Poverty Probability Index, to assess whether these employees are likely to fall below or above the national poverty line. And from our findings, 84% of the employees who work at Lake Turkana Wind Power Project have a higher probability of falling above the national poverty line. And in terms of the regional poverty average in this area is 76%. So comparing the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project employees and the regional average, the poverty levels, we see that the poverty level in the area is higher, and only 16% are likely to fall below the national poverty line. And one would ask is that, who are the 16%? The 16%, what we found out is that these are fairly new employees who haven't worked in the company for some time. And now the employment dividends would take a bit of time to trickle down, especially to create impact at the household level. So that's why we see the 16%. But in overall, 84% are likely to fall above the national poverty line. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, it is very clear that the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project has created massive impact at the employee level and also at the community level. We have seen the employees improving their household well-being. We have seen communities accessing better healthcare services. We have seen community accessing water. All these are attributed to Lake Turkana Wind Power Project. And also the company has been very effective in lobbying for service from the government. Despite the marginalization, they have worked very effectively with the country government to construct roads, which is really enormous. And this is likely to continue post without the support of the program, because now the country government is becoming more responsive to deliver services to our people. And also, before any project is implemented under the Winds of Change, there's a lot of community consultation. And from the process, they're able to prioritize the needs of the communities, and there's a lot of buy-in from the onset. So in terms of sustainability, the communities are involved from the onset, and this now builds the confidence of them owning this kind of infrastructure being supported by the Lake Turkana Wind Project. And also, we saw about people getting to value education. We've seen people now taking their children to better schools because they have seen that through better education, people can get employed. They have seen their own people getting employed. So we've seen a number of people taking their children to better schools, private schools in the neighboring countries, and this has all over changed their perception about what education can do to a community. And also, despite the over-reliance on the social projects from the Winds of Power Change, there's great collaboration, continued collaboration with the country governments and also different stakeholders are likely to deliver these impacts at scale and on a more sustainable basis. That is the end of our presentation, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silas. I think that was a very, very insightful presentation, and then we've learned a lot. Definitely what we can see is there is a wide-ranging impact. So from one project. I know Oroch has been communicating to me. There is a lot of questions. And then, but before we go there, I believe Peter has joined us. Peter, are you here with us? Hi, Peter. If you're speaking, oh yeah, I can see you there. You might want to unmute your. Yes, exactly. Activate the camera if you want. So.
I am here. I can hear you.
Okay. So, Peter, I guess you will be. Do you have? I don't think you have a presentation, but I think you want to give some perspective from the Winds of Change Foundation, correct?
Actually, I was coming in more or less to answer questions, but I can give a very brief a brief on that. I think what I really want to talk about.
Hello, Peter.
Is,
okay.
If you look at the area. Hello?
Yes, I think your signal is a bit weak, but have another go. Okay. Hopefully we'll hear you better.
I'm just going to say, if you look at the area in which we operate from, and Rose and Silas did spend a couple of days there, it's actually, for lack of a better word, a forgotten wasteland. It's up in the northwestern part of Kenya, because that part of the country had no natural resources, and it was a semi-arid area. It lay neglected and forgotten by successful governments for the last 50 odd years or so. The people who live there, they are nomadic, that's their lifestyle. There has and continues to be in the generic area a lot of cattle rustling, fighting for scarce resources, which is fights for water for their livestock. And that was the kind of landscape with which Lake Turkana came in to build the wind farm, literally almost like the moon's surface. Rains are scarce. When they come, they create flash floods. Against this backdrop, we had to come in and put up a wind farm in an area where, as one of my our employees tells us still today, they used to see a vehicle and take off, because that was something that as kids, they probably appeared once, once in a blue moon. We've leased land which is about 150,000 acres, and the population that lives within what we call the wind farm, and I say within with quotes, sometimes is as little as 35 kilometers away, but still a journey that will take you 1.5 hours with a good 4x4. The lifestyles of the people have definitely changed. Yes, we do have quite a number of people for one wind farm, if you compare it to wind farms in other parts of the world, but a large number of them are security personnel. The 4 main tribes that surround the area still do have a bit of conflict in terms of cattle rustling, and we have come and acted as a buffer in between. And also the fact that now we have the 4 communities being our employees and sitting together and eating together and sharing the same space, that has also alleviated a bit of community tensions, because at the end of the day, when somebody goes back home for vacation or for a break, you know, they will say, you know what, the Turkanas, maybe they're not too bad, as opposed to what they've grown up knowing. I think I will leave that there and then just probably answer any questions that one might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for that very much like the practical side of the story. It's always very important. And I know you run the foundation, so you have a proper understanding of how those impacts are felt by the population. So we're gonna have Alex in a couple of minutes. So before that, I just wanted to allow in two or three questions before we move into Alex. Let me jump in first, if you don't mind, to set the scene. I think there is a background noise. If the gentleman or lady can make sure that we are on mute, that'd be great. So the first question I have for all the speakers, so Alex, feel free as well to jump in, even if you haven't spoken just yet. So I'm just going to play the devil's advocate for once. So what we've heard so far this afternoon, it's a fantastic story, right, regarding the impact that the project has had, and which is, I like to say, no, I like, that's what it is. This is the largest wind farm project in the continent, 210. I actually did cover that in the book that I released 3 years ago that was talking about the wind industry in Africa. They're actually the first book talking about that in the continent, and probably the only one seen now. So my question is, all those impact, it's made possible largely by the CSR or ESG budgets, call it what you want. The question is, any other fossil fuel project can have the same CSR and same ESG budget and replicate more or less the same impact. How do we not differentiate if we now an officials and having to make a decision between the two? Because what we can see is we can see create that change on the at the level of the population. So how do we then make the clear distinction between which project you are? So I don't know who want to jump in. So either Silas, Rose, Peter, Yuho, I know you're around.
Hi, Tony. Sorry. Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. So I was saying, most of the impact that we've seen so far has been, by the way, guys, this is Yuho. Usi Hakala, I think, if I pronounce it well. So apologies.
Yes, that was good.
Yeah. So Yuho, it's works for the impact team at FinFund, and Yuho was very much instrumental in us bringing this topic together. That's why I like to pick up his brain. So I would say, Yuho, the impact that we've exposing today is made possible by the CSR or the ESG budget, however you want to call it. A fossil fuel project can have the same CSR and ESG and replicate the same impact. Now, how do you really make the difference? Because if I'm sitting as an official, I need to make the decision which project am I going to allow. If I'm just basing that on the CSR, it still doesn't make my choice easy. So, what would you say? What is the silver lining here?
From FinFund perspective, the CSR budget and CSR activities are not the rationale for financing energy projects. The primary interest is in generating electricity that is cheaper, more reliable, and cleaner than the existing generation. So that is the rationale, basic rationale for financing institutions to finance energy projects. But then, of course, with the massive undertakings like Lake Turkana, the CSR activities, they become increasingly interesting and important. So this is sort of like, these are like strawberries on the cake. These are sort of on top of everything other great and beautiful that Lake Turkana has created. This is sort of added value, something that we did not expect in the first place, but we learned afterwards, and it has become an inspirational for the whole team. And from now on, we always look at whether the electricity is cheaper, cleaner, more reliable. But now we also look at the CSR activities and make sure that the project team and the company works well with the local communities, because obviously we also come to realize that this is essential for a successful project. So it's really important, and it has to be taken very seriously.
Okay, thanks for that, Yuho. So for the answer.
Let me just add on to that. The silver lining, actually the big silver lining, is the fact that in 1 year you save up to 677,000 tons of CO2 emissions.
Okay, good. And I have to say that's the answer I was expecting. You passed the test.
Sorry. Yeah, if I may add to that, it's also $100 million in saving diesel costs per year,
and that's
which is also quite significant.
It is. It definitely is. Oluoch, I think you have maybe one question from the audience that we can ask now before we have Alex coming in with his presentation. Or yeah.
Yes, Tony, I do have a question. Actually, two questions from the audience, and the first one is from John Ocheche, and Ocheche is asking: Rose, Silas, or Peter, or even Yuho, livelihoods have been improved by Lake Turkana Wind Project. Incomes are better, increased use of renewable energy by locals. However, 310 megawatts is a lot of energy. Simple Google search shows that 1 megawatt can power roughly 650 homes. Are there any plans to use this energy to develop industries in Turkana, or is all the energy exported out of Turkana? So either Silas, Rose, Yuho, or Peter can take that.
Can I leave that to Peter? Peter, please.
Happy to address that. Well,
Yeah, I think
Peter, we lost him.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, on the power question, all the energy that we produce is transmitted and sent to a central place called Suswa, from which it is then distributed by KPLC, which is the only authorized and mandated company. By law, only Kenya Power and one other company called Rural Electrification Agency can distribute power to the country. It's a bit of a conundrum, because the reality is that if, let's say today I put up a tie ban outside my house and I generated power, I could use it, but if I want to give it to my neighbor, it can only be done by Kenya Power Company. So in that, our hands are tied. We ideally would like it distributed around Marsabit. It's actually Marsabit and not Turkana. But the reality is that our hands are tied when it comes to that, by law.
Okay, thanks, Peter, for the brief description of the answer that you've given. So I think John, Peter has answered your question. On to the second question, if you may please allow me, Tony. It's from Kennedy Mwai, who's also in the audience, and is asking or saying this in reference to the general number households in the region. What percentage of the household has at least one employee? Anything, either Silas or Rose can take that.
Okay, can I just chip in? I think Silas, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't calculate the number of, how many households actually have one employee. But what we did is that we were able to establish that during the construction there were 2,500 employees or people from the community employed at the project site. And of course, each household has on average between 5 to 11 members. And so in that way, we're able to determine the total number that actually benefited from the project. And then during implementation, there's only 315 of who are from the community. So again, in terms of between 5 to 11, then come up with about 4,000 people on average that are benefiting from the project.
Okay, cool. Tony, if you may allow me to just ask one last question, also from the audience, and it's from Fritz Faharna, if I'm pronounced that correctly, and is asking how many parts of the wind turbines are produced locally? And if not, would it be possible to manufacture almost everything locally? And this would be a real boost for the economies, for the country's development.
I absolutely agree with you. However, I certainly have to state that none of the parts were produced locally. All were sourced from investors. We do not have any company locally that produces even spare parts for the turbines. However, on a positive note, all the logistics, once all equipment landed in the country, were handled by local company.
Okay. Peter? Okay, seems like we've lost him. So Tony, can you pick it up from there?
Yeah, I think we may have lost Peter. I'm sure he'll come back in a minute. So Alex, if you are around, so I will be grateful if you can share your presentation. I believe you want me to move the slides for you. Am I correct? Alex?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Tony, that would be great. But don't move them too fast because I've only got 2.5 slides. So.
No, that's fine. So we'll have
and
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining this conference. And good afternoon to everybody who's in Kenya or elsewhere. I'm based in London at the moment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the indirect economic impacts of the project. So the main focus of this discussion and the study that Rose and Silas did was on more of the direct impact in the region, on the workers and local communities. But as Yuho said, there's also the goal of creating cheaper, cleaner and more reliable electricity for the country and for Kenya Power to distribute in according with government policy towards households, but also towards businesses. And so blending the social impact for households and also businesses. So I'm going to talk to you about some estimates that we've done at CDC using a tool which we call the Joint Impact Model. And that is developed by a group of investors from the development finance community, so particularly CDC in the UK here. We also are an investor in the Turkana project. We've worked with FMO, with Proparco in France, FMO in the Netherlands, with FinFund as well, and with the Belgian Development Finance Institution and also the African Development Bank to build a tool that enables project developers and investors and community workers to estimate the indirect economic impacts of their projects. So this is the Joint Impact Tool, JIM. And Tony, could you flick to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm not going to go through detail by detail because we don't have time, but the joint impact tool basically is a mathematical algorithm-based model that tries to work out what is the conversion ratio of megawatt hours of additional electricity, and how do they translate into increased productivity in Kenyan businesses. And when I say Kenyan, this model works for about 70 countries all across the world in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. But it has one set of calculations specifically for Kenya. And what we know is that when companies get more reliable and cheaper electricity, they are able to increase their productivity. We know this from a number of studies in different countries, including Kenya, but also Uganda and other countries in Africa. And so what this model does is work out the average increase in productivity in the companies that use the electricity. And if there is a price change, then it also works out what the companies are able to do to improve their performance by paying less money for the electricity that they buy from Kenya Power. And so the outputs of this model come in terms of dollars of increased economic value added, and also a calculation as to what is the employment impact of creating additional economic activity in the country, i.e. how many additional workers would you need to deliver the additional productivity. And for those of you who have economics backgrounds or who into modeling, this is normally called an input-output model. So it relies on a social accounting matrix for the Kenyan economy that shows all of the inputs and all of the outputs through all of the sectors in the Kenyan economy. So that a unit of increased inputs into one sector will lead to what outputs from that sector, and where do those outputs go in the economy. So the questions about the importing the turbines from China or wherever, Turkey or wherever they've been manufactured, and the questions about the broader impacts on the Lake Turkana region, but also across the whole of Kenya, can be estimated from this model. So I won't go into any more of the details there. If you're interested, please do contact me, and I can show you a lot more about how this model works. But Tony, could you flick on to the next slide, please? So what we estimate is that the increased megawatt hours of electricity that you can see at the top there from the operational functioning of Lake Turkana, and luckily it's a very windy area as well as being desolate, and therefore the efficiency of the turbines is pretty high compared to some other areas, so it produces a lot of megawatt hours of electricity. So we find that electricity going into the Kenyan national system can increase the reliability of the system, and businesses benefit from that. And we estimate that that is worth an additional $183 million of production, economic value added in the Kenyan economy. And to deliver that additional productivity would require just under 40,000 additional jobs, so 38.8 thousand. Now, do those jobs definitely happen? Sometimes companies can increase productivity by buying more machinery, so they don't need the workers if they significantly improve their productivity. But on average, we think that these jobs are required to deliver the increased productivity that Lake Turkana contributes towards. So just in terms of context, we've heard a lot about the 350, the impact on 350 direct workers and the community of their household members that Rose discussed, and also the benefits of all of the community engagement for the local community. And then you have this additional impact, which Yuho talked about, from the cleaner, cheaper, more reliable electricity. And just when you think about this additional economic activity, now this also creates some carbon footprint in the economy. So even though Lake Turkana is 100% green and carbon reducing, some of the additional activity requires additional emissions from businesses. So it's not correct to think about wind projects or solar projects as being 100% carbon neutral in their broad economic impacts, unless the whole economy is decarbonized. But I don't want to get into that discussion in too much detail now, but just be careful when you talk, Tony, in terms of communications and other people who are working on development. When you think about the indirect effects that we're after, you have to think about what that means in terms of increased activity, more driving around, more production, more buying diesel for backup generators, et cetera. As businesses grow, they will use more energy, and not all of it will be renewable. So I'm going to stop there. That's my 2 slides. So the main message here is very significant economic impact across the whole Kenyan economy from the project, in addition to the direct and community impacts that we're mainly discussing in this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. So that was short and sweet, but very insightful, nevertheless. So I think with that said, we should be able now to move into our question and answer session. Yeah, so the second part. So Oluwach, I'm just going to go back to you. I guess you have further questions with you. I've seen some in the chat, so if you can read that. We have about 10 minutes before we start wrapping up the session. I know it goes quite quickly. And remember, for people that are online, we have a special announcement at the end, so please do stick around. Oluwach.
Okay, thanks, Tony. This one goes to FinFund. And the question goes like this. We would like to install 6 biogas digesters in 6 off-grid energy rural hard-to-reach communities in northern Malawi. And training communities on charcoal briquette production. Can you support us financially to carry out this project? Yeah.
Hi. Direct funding question, Yuho.
Thank you. Excellent, lovely. I love these questions. Yes, I can't promise straight away from here, but I can promise you that we will definitely look at the possibilities. If you could send me some material on this via email, I would be very happy. I would be very happy to take a closer look at that, and then also to direct it to our investment officer.
I think you want to be careful, Yuho. You may end up having 100 applications, including ours.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't mind. That is the reason why we are here. I welcome applications. I welcome proposals. Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So another question, actually these 2 questions were sent prior to we having this webinar, so they were sent a couple of days ago. So the other question is, what makes the use of wind power in developing countries much more beneficial? Yeah, Peter, Rose, Silas, Yuho, anyone can pick it up. What makes the use of wind power in developing countries much more beneficial?
I think
Silas,
is somebody speaking here?
Who's going first?
Okay. So the reason I want to help out a little bit, because at Renewables in Africa, we published the first book talking about the wind industry outlook in Africa. So check it out. And if you can't see the link, we can definitely share that with you. And where we were looking at the whole market, looking at the potential, the resources, the different markets, the players, and also the outlook for the coming year. So years. And what makes wind power beneficial for emerging market countries is simply the fact that we strongly believe that countries that have different resources, a way for them to cut down costs on energy is to actually use the resources that are present locally. Because we were talking about diesel, for example, early on. If you are not a country that runs on diesel with a lot of diesel, you have to go and procure that from somebody else. This is where you have the added cost coming to that. So when you talk about emerging market, no, it's not all emerging market. In Africa, for example, you have enormous wind resources in the north, in the east, and also in the south. If you look at Central Africa or maybe the west part of Africa, not that much as per the current technology. That's an important factor. When I say as per the current technology, is because for an industrial exploitation of the wind resource, you want to have a wind regime above 5 meters per second or 6 meters per second. And those are the regions I've mentioned to you where we could see that. When you're able to do that, then you can build large wind farm, and obviously onshore, because at the moment we don't have offshore yet in Africa. And as you build that, then obviously you can recoup economy coming from the scale, from the size of the project. And now looking at the cost of this project, now wind is pretty much on par with solar these days when you build that, which means you need roughly about $1 million per megawatt. Yeah, it could be a little bit more, a little bit less. It depends where you are. And that's what we see. And what we've seen is when you now compare that for traditional fossil fuel, definitely is compared with coal these days, especially if you're not in southern part of Africa. So it's getting competitive with oil. So in a nutshell, what makes it competitive or what makes it good for emerging market is simply the fact that they're cost effective and they're cleaner, right? So that's the whole point. And I've said that in one of the conference I've attended. What people should also be thinking, especially what COVID has get us to think about, are you going to be running an economy with sick people? Surely not. So you want to be looking at the health factor as well, very important. And I think Rose and Silas highlighted that very well. So yeah, Oloch, back to you. I just wanted to say that quickly to respond.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Another question coming from the audience, and this one is directed to Alex. Would you know what % of Kenya's energy is produced by the Lake Turkana Wind Project? This will also give some good proxy for impact, I think. That's what John Ocheche is saying. So would you know what % of Kenya's energy is produced by Lake Turkana Wind Project, Alex?
No, I don't. But it should be pretty easy to find out because we've now got 1 full year of production data from the company in megawatt hours, and from Kenya Power on their website, they've got the total production. So that wouldn't include off-grid solar, but that's very small in terms of megawatt hours. So I think it's an easy calculation. I just don't know the Kenyan national production for 2019. Probably Peter knows that, or maybe even Tony. But I don't. I mean, I don't think it's in an enormous amount.
Okay.
But it's significant.
Can I just, sorry, Oloch, can I just chip in? I think
yes, Rose, please.
When we did the study, we found that it's about 12 to 13% during the day, and a bit higher at night, so up to 19%.
Okay, John, I think, I believe Rose has answered your question.
Yeah. Oloch, allow me to ask you a very quick question to Alex here.
Okay.
Alex has very much highlighted the impacts calculator, from Kenya. I was actually wondering, because I know Alex has worked maybe 1 or 2 other East African countries, and I wanted to know, is it the same kind of observation that you have made in those neighboring countries as well? I'm thinking about the likes of Tanzania, Malawi, or Uganda, and so on and so forth. So just, I don't know, just out of curiosity.
I mean, every country obviously is really different. We haven't done studies in every country, but the one thing that that we know is that if you imagine running a business and imagine what sorts of business are going to be most disrupted by power outages or unreliability or high prices. So those sort of businesses are ones that where if the power goes off, you immediately start losing some of your production. So the worst sort of business is like chemical, a plastics business where you have extruding machines, and when the power goes off, the plastic solidifies in the machines, and you have to throw it away and start again. And the best sort of business is where is maybe a furniture workshop where if the power goes off, you can stop working on a power tool and do some hand work, sanding or finishing or varnishing. So every business is different, and therefore the countries that tend to get the best benefits from improved electricity are ones that have quite a sophisticated industrial sector that is very dependent on electricity, and either they lose production or they have to kick in backup generators, which are expensive to continue production, because if they stop, they lose product. And so Kenya is particularly well suited for increased electricity production, even though it's not the poorest country. It's got a big enough industrial base to get more benefit from improved electricity. Whereas in Tanzania, you have a structure where there's less manufacturing, and therefore, even though you put in more power, you don't necessarily get the same economic benefit. You might get an equal social benefit, but you might not get so much productivity change. So it's not the case that for economic reasons, you have to get more electricity to the poorest of the poor economies. And at the national level, I think there's, that was a really interesting question about keeping electricity in the Lake Turkana region or letting it go through the whole grid to where it's most needed. That's a decision for Kenyan politicians and engineers in Kenya to work out where the electricity can be most beneficial. It is not the case that if you could only keep it in the poorest region that you get the biggest benefit. It's more complicated than that.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I think, Oluj, we're going to have one more question if there is, and after that, we will start wrapping up. Like I say, we want to move our short and sweet announcement. One more question?
Yes, Tony. There's one which was actually sent 2 days ago. And one is also, it's actually more or less related to the one from someone in Malawi with regards to funding. And I think that one has already been addressed. So I'll ask the last one, which is, what are the perspectives for similar projects in East Africa?
Okay, good. So the perspective. So I guess we want to talk to the people on the ground. Silas, Rose, have you heard of any project, or maybe Peter, have you heard of any projects that are similar in the region?
Hi, I've not heard of any and this would be for a number of reasons. Obviously, to have a wind power project, you've got to have the perfect storm in terms of wind and wind consistency. But Uganda, who's our neighbor to the west, has plentiful of water in their dams. Actually, for a long time, Kenya was importing electricity from Uganda. Tanzania has just, in the recent years, come across a discovery of large quantum of natural gas, which for them would probably be where they would be looking to generate their electricity from. So apart from one that's coming up in an area called Kajiado in Kenya called Kipeto, with which the PPA had been signed many years ago, I don't seem to be cognizant of any other project similar to ours coming up.
Okay, so
okay, thanks for that, Silas. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. So I'm sure everybody would agree with me to say that this was a very interesting session so far, and very good level of presentation, also intervention. So thank you to all the speakers. So I just want to keep up with you for another 4 or 5 minutes before we close the session, just to talk about the announcement I've been referring to. Because one thing that is important to build those projects and have the kind of impact we've talked about, you clearly need to have enough trained and skilled people on the ground. And skill shortages has been and is still a main issue, one of the main issues in the industry. So at Renewables in Africa, we clearly have decided to look at that seriously. We have had 2 initiatives already that we've taken. So one is with Clean Energy for Africa. That's a group of young people, very, very dynamic, who have launched a volunteer program where they voluntarily training some candidate that they are selecting to the process. We are collaborating and participating in the training as and when we can. That's the first initiative. So allow you to get some insight about the industry knowledge, basic knowledge. Then we've also decided to collaborate with an organization called ISSR, and they're providing training and certification opportunities to various people who wants to up the game and upskill as well. All of that is absolutely necessary and very good. However, we thought that still does not close completely the gap, in the sense that if you have the knowledge, you still need to know how you go about now building and developing this project. And this is where our opportunity has come, and that's what we have wanted to develop. So I'm just going to play a video from my screen. Hopefully you can see, so you'll be able to tell me. I'm sharing my screen. And hi, Zole. Are you looking to make a difference? Are you interested by solar power? Have you been looking desperately not only to find out more about the industry, but to learn how to become a solar developer? You have come to the right place. I am Tony T. And 10 years ago, I was exactly stuck where you are. It took me many years and many sacrifices to learn the game, and for my company, Renewable in Africa, to be recognized in the sector. You don't need to wait or go to the same roller coaster. You can learn from our experience and save time and money. Interesting, right? No need to move. I come to you. I'm launching a virtual course to help aspiring developers to acquire the expertise and confidence they need to develop bankable solar projects in Africa and the rest of the world. Are you interested? I like to show you more. I like to tell you how. In less than 30 days, you can go from a beginner level to an advanced developer level and understand how to attract the funding your project needs. Sound pretty cool, right? Click on the link below. Sign up for the course now and get ready to start your career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're in, Tony, we're in.
Okay. Excellent. That's fine then. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I know we out of time just right now. It's about 1:30. All that's left for me to say. So thank you very much for joining. Definitely do watch out for our masterclass virtual course for people who want to learn how to develop solar projects. So we've learned from my experience and we wanted to share that with everybody. So you're going to be seeing a major announcement about that in the next few days. All that's left for me to say, thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for Rose, Silas, Peter, and Alex, Yuho as well. And thank you for all the participants. It was a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm hoping you have enjoyed yourself. So have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Stay well.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Thank you all for attending.
All right. Bye. Bye.
Bye.